a Town Square media station. This is Game Night with Josh Hennig on 97.3 ESPN and the free mobile app. Now, live from the Matt Black Kia Studios.
What a move!
Here's Josh Hennig.
Thursday edition of Game Night, 97.3 ESPN FM and 97.3 ESPN mobile app. And as always, we are live on YouTube and Twitter where you can watch the show, join the conversation. We got a bunch of news to get to off the top of the show. And also get to some of the news a little bit later because bad news for the Phillies today. If last night's loss wasn't enough, the Phillies got some bad news today. Plus, the Eagles, they have a preseason game. The expectation is looks like nobody's going to play. It looks like that they genuinely value the joint practices so much that they're not even going to play tomorrow. So the other news that happened today, the Flyers re-signed Sean Couturier to an 8-year contract extension, and the Flyers have kept busy. So we're going to talk with Kevin Durso, our Flyers insider, coming up at 6:20 because I need some positivity in my life. I need something good to talk about. I need something, when I come on the air with you guys, it's all been doom and misery and exasperation lately. So because the Flyers are actually out there doing some good things, let's talk about it. Why not, right? Why not talk about the Fly Guys? So we're going to do that Kevin Durso at 6:20, but we'll get to the news right here. A couple of news items that popped off just in the last hour. And of course, you guys can chime in throughout the show. Text board is open 609-403-0973. Direct message to the show through the 97.3 ESPN mobile app. It's free thanks to First Bank of Seattle City. And we are live on YouTube and Twitter. All right. So Phillies made some moves today. And if it wasn't bad enough that Rhys Hoskins was going on the injured list, okay, it got worse. Rhys Hoskins told the media just under an hour ago that his season is basically done. He's going to be getting surgery on the lower abdominal issue that has caused him to be put on the injured list and miss games with the groin problem. So, as a result, earlier today, the Phillies made some moves on a multitude of fronts. They reinstated Zach Eflin and Jose Alvarado, which is good news. They designated Chase Anderson for assignment, and then they placed Hoskins on the injured list. Also, Adam Hazley was reinstated from the COVID list and will continue playing with Jersey Shore A-ball over there in Lakewood. So it's not all bad news for the Phillies. It just feels like all bad news because losing Rhys Hoskins may be the thing that either makes or breaks this team. And I can't believe I'm saying that. But I can't get up here and lie because it's to the point with this Phillies team where they were scoring 2.87 runs per game without him. He's the team leader in RBI. Last night, they couldn't get the job done. The night before, they couldn't score. And in both games, the defense was garbage. At some point, this team's got to own something. They got to own their problems because it's an absolute joke and an embarrassment that this team can't win games. You could have had 2 games against Tampa going into the Arizona series tonight. Could have had some good vibes going for you, but no. You go out there, you choke, you give up a lead multiple times in this 2-game series with Tampa. It's almost like they don't know they don't know how to win anymore. It's almost like this team forgot how to win. And that in and of itself is embarrassing. It's a joke. I don't care who you are. Gene Segura is batting, let me double check it. I had the stat earlier. And I don't want to get it wrong, so let me just pull it up real quick. So here it is. Since the All-Star break in 37 games, Gene Segura is batting .230 with a .374 slugging percentage and a .321 on-base percentage. That's embarrassing. You can't go from a guy batting .300 to .230. And you know why he's hitting 230? Because how many times have we seen Gene Segura get up at bat and he goes in that uppercut swing of his because he's trying to drive it into the outfield, and then he pops it up straight in the air. Or infield fly rule, or pops it out of bounds. You know, Bryce Harper, great home run last night, goes to waste. Why? Because half the team doesn't know what they're doing. And as usual, Girardi changes the lineup again going into tonight's game. Not just because Hoskins not out there, but because they lost last night. That's what Girardi does. They lose a game, he changes the batting lineup. So now we got Odubel Herrera in left field, Segura, Harper, Real Muto, Didi Gregorius, Brad Miller back at first base, Torreyes at third, Jankowski. And by the way, Matt Moore's pitching tonight because for whatever reason, Eflin was supposed to pitch today, but he was last minute scratch. His knee flared up. I told you, it's a lot of bad news today. I don't know what to do with this Phillies team anymore. I am so utterly burned out with this team. This team looked like for at least a few games, they were going to be the feel-good thing of the summer to get us through the football season. Now we got a preseason game tomorrow night where almost nobody of consequence is going to play. We have a college football season that starts this weekend, but the problem is that unless you're a college football fan, you don't care about the games because the marquee games are next weekend. There's nothing else on sports-wise. We're just stuck with the Phillies. And that's why I'm going to have Kevin Durso come on today at 6:20 because we need a little joy, a little positivity on a day like this because everything's going wrong for the Phillies. And meanwhile, the Flyers are at least putting a smile on your face. Maybe not a huge smile on your face, but certainly turning the frown from the Phillies upside down and making it a smile. Because this Phillies team is a complete joke now. You know, Hoskins comes back on Sunday. They score 7 runs. You're like, all right, we're back at it. We're back in business. Day off. Okay, they got to travel home. And they come home and they just completely just drop the ball. Utterly, horribly, completely in the most embarrassing way possible. Their defense is garbage. Their offense doesn't know what they're doing. Their pitching staff is doing their best. And Girardi looks like he's lost. Girardi doesn't have any more answers. And I don't think any manager would at this point. Because this roster was just poorly constructed. Dave Dombrowski walked into the situation where he was handed this slop and said, good luck. Make lemonade out of these lemons. Make some chicken salad out of chicken poo-poo, right? That's what he basically is trying to do here. And as the season goes on, it's proven more and more and more that this team is just a load of garbage. You can't... This is what it reminds me of. Remember last year with the Flyers when they would lose games? And it was just like, why are you losing these games? How are you losing these games? Where is the effort? Where is the desire? Where is the passion? I don't care that Bryce Harper went up to the post game in a tie-dye shirt, said we have to play better. Because you know what? It doesn't matter. It's all words. This Hoskins end of season news is either going to break this team or galvanize them. It's one or the other. They're going to completely drop off the face of the earth, or they're going to rally together. They're going to pick up their face out of the mud. They're going to clean themselves off, and get back to work. It's one or the other because you got Arizona coming in here. We told you guys last week, this is the worst team in the National League, and you just got swept by them last week. If you don't win 3 out of 4 at minimum against Arizona this weekend, you deserve every boo, criticism, ridicule coming your way. You cannot have 2 former league MVPs on a roster like the Phillies do. You can't have a potential Cy Young candidate this year and a potential Cy Young candidate from a couple of years ago on this roster. You can't have the supposed best catcher in baseball, which he isn't, obviously, even though he was an all-star because they just felt like giving it to him for some dumb reason. You can't have all of this talent on this team and keep playing like this. It's a joke. And I'm fed up. Josh Hennig here on GameNight on 97.3 ESPN. Again, the news is Hoskins' year is done. He's going to have surgery for the lower abdominal issue, which is the reason why he's now missing time. Obviously, they call it the groin, but the groin is connected to the lower abdomen, so who knows exactly what happened when he fell last night. He tried to go for that ball. His leg just gave out. You knew something was wrong, and apparently it's worse than we thought. And now Eflin gets scratched from his return start due to knee inflammation. Joy. Just ridiculous. I promise I get some Eagles stuff before we move on to some other things because, like I said, we're going to try to at least turn the page. We're going to try to turn the frown upside down because we're going to have Kevin Durso to come on today because Sean Couturier signed an 8-year contract extension. So while the other 3 Philadelphia sports teams may be frustrating you, the Flyers, which are the most overlooked team in the city most of the time, are actually having a great offseason for all intents and purposes. So we're going to give you some positive news today coming up at 6:20. Now, the Eagles news isn't positive, but let's be realistic. We're at a point with the Eagles right now where we don't even know what we're looking at. We have theories, we have assumptions, we have beliefs about what they are, but we don't really know for sure. All we've seen of this offense is a handful of plays, and that's it. And I don't even know how much you can read into that because 1, it was a vanilla offense, and 2, because the only video we see online is usually good video. I mean, it's not like you're seeing a bunch of bad plays from Eagles practices. No, it's usually good plays. Jalen Hurts throwing on the run, touchdown to Quez Watkins, the Jalen Reagor catch against the Patriots. It's all good stuff, right? So we don't really know exactly what the deal is. We just have things to hope for. We have theories of what the defense is going to be. And based on all reports from everyone who was at camp this week, the Eagles' defensive line dominated a very subpar Jets offense. All right, that's cool. We know that Derek Barnett has missed time with his shoulder injury. We know that Javon Hargrave was back at joint practice this week. So it's not that it's bad what's going on with the Eagles. It's not that it's all negative, but at the end of the day, the problem is that we don't 100% know. And because we don't fully know what's going on, because we don't fully understand, what's going to happen, that it's all subjective. And look, I get it that some of you have been influenced out there by national talking heads who have gone out there and said the Eagles are garbage and Jalen Hurts can't play. And listen, if you want to be gullible and follow the leader, that's fine. But I've stuck to this position, I will continue to stick to this position, that this team is going to win 7 to 8 games this year. And I've said it once, and I said it twice, and I'll say it again right here. You can't take the preseason games and project it to the regular season. Half the guys playing in these games won't even be in the NFL this year. You can't tell me what happened in the Steelers and the Patriots game is going to impact the regular season. The Baltimore Ravens have won what is it, 18, 20 preseason games in a row? How many Super Bowl rings they got? Sean McVay doesn't play his guys in the preseason at all. Just a couple of years ago, they were in the Super Bowl. the preseason, it's an opportunity to evaluate players, but don't take what happens in the preseason to heart. Here's what you can take to heart. Number one, if the Eagles' offensive line is healthy, Lane Johnson, Brandon Brooks, Jason Kelsey, Isaac Seumalo, Jordan Mailata, they are one of the 5 to 10 best offensive lines in the NFL easily. And if you have a better offensive line, that means the young quarterback behind center will have more opportunities to play well. Number 2, speaking of the young quarterback, there's no way Jalen Hurts can play worse than Carson Wentz did last year. Jalen Hurts does not like to make risky throws. It's not in his style of play. He'd rather throw the ball away than take a sack or throw an interception. And if you're like me and you believe Carson Wentz lost this team 3 games last year by himself, then you should be better than last year. And number 3, I think it's fairly obvious that Jonathan Gannon is going to bring something to the table defensively that half the league is not expecting. And it'll take a few weeks for the league to adjust. So I think this team will be better, but you just won't see the team tomorrow night. You'll hear about guys competing for the last 10 spots in the roster. And you can hear it right here on 97.3 ESPN FM. 6:30 p.m. is the coverage. And of course, Merrill Reese and Mike Quick with all the Eagles coverage all year long, right here on your home for Eagles football in South Jersey, 97.3 ESPN. We'll get to your messages a little bit later in the hour. Text board is open, 609-403-0973. You can direct message the show through the 97.3 ESPN mobile app. Thanks to First Bank of Seattle City. And we are live on YouTube and Twitter. Just follow at 973 ESPN. Coming up next, we're going to go a little more positive. The Flyers are the happiest team in the city. We'll talk about it next with our Flyers insider, Kevin Durso, right here on 97.3 ESPN FM. I'm Josh Hennig, and this is Game Night.
This is the radio home for Philadelphia Eagles football. The Eagles finish the 2021 preseason tomorrow night against the New York Jets.
Takes the snap. Here comes the rush. Let's go. Complete into the end zone. Touchdown, Zachary.
Merrill and Mike call all the action starting at 7:30. This is where the Eagles play. 97.3 ESPN, South Jersey's Eagles station.
On some models excludes core bet with GM financing, excludes price sale. See dealer for details. Have you seen what some dealers are now charging for new cars and used vehicles? It's outrageous. But at Bennett Chevrolet, you still pay what GM supplier employees pay for brand new Chevys. Plus, Bennett gives you all the rebates. That's not either or, you get both. And that can save you up to 25% off MSRP. And Bennett has 0% financing available to save you even more. Got a trade? Bennett's paying top dollar. And we mean top dollar. A minimum $7,000 towards any pre-owned in stock. That's a minimum $7,000 for any old clunker you can tow to our lot. And if it's in good shape, we'll pay more. And we'll buy your vehicle even if you don't buy one of ours. And Bennett makes it so easy. No sales pressure, no negotiating, just pure joy. Because our non-commissioned sales staff is paid on your satisfaction, not how much you spend. So you can see why nobody beats Bennett Chevrolet. Nobody. Find new roads at Bennett Chevy, Egg Harbor Township, and BennettChevy.com.
Why would someone looking for a mortgage at the Jersey Shore take a loan from a company in Detroit or North Carolina or some other far-off place? Online mortgages promise a lot but don't always deliver. First Bank of Sea Isle City knows the Jersey Shore. We are local lenders. We use local appraisers and provide in-house processing. We understand the unique obstacles of financing in Cape May County. Don't take a chance. Local banking is better. Let us guide you. First Bank of Sea Isle City.
Member FDIC, equal housing lender.
You're listening to Game Night with Josh Hennig on 97.3 ESPN and the free mobile app.
Josh Hennig here, Game Night, 97.3 ESPN FM and 97.3 ESPN mobile app. We are live as always on YouTube and Twitter. We'll do all your messages a little bit later in the hour. Of course, there are a multitude of ways to get a hold of the show each day on 97.3 ESPN. The text board is open at 609-403-0973. Direct message the show through the 97.3 ESPN mobile app. Thanks to First Bank of Sea Isle City, and we are live as always on YouTube and Twitter. Just follow at 973 ESPN. Speaking of the 973 ESPN mobile app, if you would have already downloaded it today, you would have known that the Flyers are making moves this week. We've got all the alerts to the 973 ESPN mobile app to talk about the good news in Philadelphia, because the Phillies are an abomination. The Sixers are basically frustrating everybody on some level. And the Eagles aren't going to play anybody of consequence for the starting lineup tomorrow night. So the Flyers are the only good news in Philadelphia. And joining us right now to talk about it is our Flyers insider, Kevin Durso, here on 97.3 ESPN. Kevin, how you doing today?
I'm doing well, Josh. How are you?
Well, I'm sure you are doing well, because it's Chuck Fletcher has stayed busy the entire offseason. I feel like there has not gone a week by where you have not written an article on the website at this point. And obviously the bigger news today is Sean Couturier gets the 8-year contract extension. And, for the traditional hockey fan, the 8-year extension is kind of the signal that this is a guy who's important to this team. So we know how important Sean Couturier is to the Flyers, but how important was his extension for the Flyers?
It's very important. You're going to base a lot of what you do moving forward probably around this deal now that you know what it is. And that's a question I asked Chuck Fletcher at his press conference today was, now that you know the number, does that help you moving forward with everything else? They only had 10 players signed beyond this season going into today. Now they have 11 because of Couturier, but it gives you more clarity, especially when this was the big piece. This was the free agent to be next season that you needed to know the most about in order to kind of dictate where the rest of the offseason would go down the road, because this is a guy who is probably going to require the most money. And to be quite honest, I called Chuck Fletcher a magician for this one. I think it's an outstanding deal. I have no idea how he kept that number under $8 million a year. I really don't. This is a guy who is a former Selke winner, one of the best two-way centers in the game, probably easily a top 20 forward in the game right now, just with his combination of point production meets defensive play. He can do it all. He's good at everything. I would have thought that this is, and especially if he would have waited too, if he would have waited till free agency next season or after the season was over and another year of statistics and being able to compare to other players in the same range as he is, who knows what kind of money this would have been? Maybe $8.5 million, maybe $9 million. Like, I honestly was preparing myself when I kind of got the hint that an extension was coming. The Flyers very cryptically tweeted a little clip of him smiling. And I thought that, I'm like, well, gee, that can only mean one thing, probably. We kind of knew that once Carter Hart was re-signed, once Travis Sanheim was re-signed, they didn't have anything else they necessarily had to do this offseason for next season. But they have 2 pending free agents after next season that there was going to be a lot of attention surrounding, and this was the biggest one of all. And now he gets his extension. Like I said, it's a great deal because it allows them to kind of build everything around him going forward. And let's put it this way, the fact that he's not making that $8 million range, he's making less money than Jake Voracek is for the next 3 years. Let's just put it that way, and that's astonishing given where he is in his career, in entering the prime of it, really. 28, going to be 29 starting next season. He's still on that previous contract until after this season, though, so he'll be 30 when this contract really kicks in. But nonetheless, he's entering the prime of his career, and this is a guy you want to have on your team, and I think it's a great deal for all sides.
And it makes sense because, aside from the fact that he's the Selke winner, it's also the fact that, the guy's a two-way player. He's a standard for the team in many ways. And, if you're Chuck Fletcher and you're serious about changing the culture of this team, this was the logical next step, right? You moved on from Voracek. You overhauled part of the roster. You brought in all these guys with former letters on their jerseys, right? Guys like Atkinson and Ristolainen and Ellis. So why not turn to the guy who's already been on your team as the staple of the two-way player and say, this is the guy moving forward?
Well, not only that, but I also would throw in the fact that now that this is done, and it's done before this upcoming season, before he even gets close to free agency, this tells you that the players that are still here following this offseason of change have paid a lot of attention to what Chuck Fletcher has done and believe in it, because there's no doubt that Sean Couturier could have played out this year, waited his time, and kind of got into that free agency period and maybe explored some options. Maybe there was a possibility he wouldn't have been back here because he could have made more money somewhere else. And he didn't decide to do that. He just decided to sign the extension now. It's going to take him till he's 37 years old. So, that pretty much solidifies that you're pretty much playing for one team for your entire career. And that pretty much to me says that he believes in everything they've done. And now you've got the stamp of approval from one of your current players now too, who just completely buys into everything that's done. And I think Chuck Fletcher's response, and this goes back, it was actually, again, to the question that I asked him. He even said, if Sean Couturier had left, it changes the entire direction of the franchise. So this is the importance of the player to the franchise, and the player recognizing that the franchise has done something this offseason that changes things up, makes it more exciting, more interesting, and makes them believe in what they've done to this point, that he feels like he can sign this extension at this time, and instead of waiting out the season, and still, have this confidence in this team that they're going to, not just for next year, but obviously for years down the road, because it's an 8-year deal for a reason. He fully believes that this team can be successful over the better part of the next decade. And that's a huge sign for the Flyers of what they've done, and kind of validates a lot of what Chuck Fletcher's done so far.
Kevin Durso joining us here on Game Night on 97.3 ES. Talking about the only good news in Philadelphia right now, and that is the Flyers continue to put the team in the right direction, because signing Couturier is important to the future, as you mentioned, but also this week they brought in a guy in Derek Brassard, which really fills the last need, which is another centerman, giving you some extra depth. Now, if Brassard's good to go, you don't need to ask guys like Giroux to play as many many shifts is the word I was looking for in hockey. I'm got football in the mind still, but many shifts at center. So, now you get some more depth to the forwards and a guy who can specifically play center.
Yeah, and here's the thing too, because you're talking about all this good positivity news and all that type of stuff. Who said August in the NHL is boring? Because apparently Chuck Fletcher doesn't think so at all. This is usually the downtime leading up to training camp, and Chuck Fletcher's still doing things, and we're almost to September, and then next thing you know, we'll be getting training camp announcements and things like that. So he's working right up until the end of the offseason. And I really like this signing by Chuck Fletcher. First of all, it's cost effective. You don't get much lower risk than signing a guy to a 1-year deal at $825,000, and he's a veteran player. It very much feels like the Keith Yandle signing, because this is again a way to spell a younger player in the event that he's not completely ready yet. And you'd love to see Morgan Frost emerge as a player, and maybe he does during training camp. That doesn't mean that this is out of the question, but it takes the pressure off. I think it's very clear that Chuck Fletcher did not want to go into this season feeling like they had to rely on a young player to play in some significant role or take that big leap and fill a huge void that quickly. And Brassard really gives them not only the veteran presence, but again, a guy who, like Keith Yandle, this is a signing that has Alain Vigneault's fingerprints all over it, because again, another one of these former Ranger players who was part of kind of the early days when Alain Vigneault was there. And it just seems like they're trying to reunite that group together, and everybody seems excited about it. I mean, Brassard he had his media availability this afternoon. We're going to talk to Sean Couturier tomorrow. But when Brassard was speaking, when a question came up about Kevin Hayes and Keith Yandle and guys like that, and Brassard also played with Cam Atkinson too in Columbus for a little while too. So when all those names came up, he got a big smile on his face. So clearly these players that have come here that kind of, and let's put it this way, Kevin Hayes is still relatively new. It'll be his 3rd season. So he's a recent enough signing that you go, these guys have just shown up within the last couple of years, and they are kind of forming this group and creating an identity for themselves, because it's turning into, I'm going to bring all my friends to Philadelphia, essentially. And it's a great thing when you have that bond already and guys who like each other, who have had chemistry in the past, and you're trying to replicate it. Brassard's best years in the NHL have come when he played for Alain Vigneault, and that's what you're somewhat trying to replicate. I certainly would take the performance that he gave with the Islanders 2 seasons ago, double-digit goals during the season, solid player who brings a bit of a physical edge too. He can fill that bottom six role perfectly. I think you're going to like to see him on this team. If you need to put a guy out there for some form of significant minutes, I wouldn't call it anything close to top six, but definitely 12 or 13 minutes a night where you're trying to make sure that you fill that gap. And I think you already brought up a couple of names or you brought up Claude Drew's name anyway, as one who now you can play him maybe fewer shifts a game. I think what it actually does is it keeps Claude Drew on the wing where they prefer him to be. I think it does the same for Scott Lawton as well. So now you have two guys that you can play in the position that you actually want them to play. Broussard can take the middle of the ice. Broussard actually said he can play any forward position, so he could play either wing as well. But I think they want him down the middle. I think that this is all about depth down the middle, and it allows you to play everybody else at a place where you feel most comfortable.
Now, with all that being said, Kevin, you mentioned just a bit ago, we're a couple weeks away from training camp, basically. You know, we're not that far away from camp coming around the corner. So what are reasonable expectations for this team? Because in many ways, last year was a disappointment, but also last year, you know, maybe 2020 tells you it kind of could have been expected, right? So what is a reasonable expectation? If we take away all the silliness out there, okay, what is an objective idea of what the Flyers can be this upcoming season?
Well, I certainly think that you have to have playoffs on the table right about now because you've done just about everything you can to improve the team for one, but also you're banking on a lot of one-year deals at this point. Let's be clear about that. I mean, it's nice to know that Sean Couturier is locked up for 8 years beyond this season. Cam Atkinson's going to be on the first of 4 remaining years on his contract when you brought him in. Ryan Ellis still has 6 left on his deal. And you have enough players that I guess we could say establish kind of the new core, so to speak, because Couturier's got that long-term deal now. Kevin Hayes still has plenty of years left on that deal that he signed a couple of years back. Travis Konechny has a lot of years left. Ivan Provorov has a lot of years left. Carter Hart's got a new 3-year deal. Like, you've kind of established who your guys are, and everybody else who's on a 1-year deal is kind of in a wait-and-see position at this point. So I really think that in order to avoid doing anything close to this again next season, that you need to be a playoff team. If you don't want to have a similar offseason that becomes another summer of Chuck Fletcher making a ton of moves all over the place, then I think you need to be successful. And I think they can be successful because, first of all, if nothing else, it's going to be exciting going into the season for all of the changes. You're going to see so many new faces now. I mean, it just continues to grow. I kind of said, don't be surprised if there were 3 or 4 at the beginning of the offseason. I think that's now 7 or 8 that's going to be new to this team. So you're getting dangerously close to having half of your roster be brand new to this team. And that really says a lot about the work that Chuck Fletcher's done this entire offseason to this point. And he's somehow or other, and believe me, I don't really know how he's managed to do it in a flat cap world, but he's managed to basically address just about every need you had in some way, shape, or form. You know, and I don't know if we don't know if all these are going to work out. It's, you know, we're still waiting to see what Rasmus Ristolainen is now that he's out of Buffalo. Now that he's going to play maybe in a slightly reduced role. We're going to wait and see what happens with Carter Hart and what happens with Martin Jones as well as the backup or the second goaltender, however the role kind of plays out. Wait to see what kind of a fit Cam Atkinson is, even though it seems like he's going to be a great fit right off the jump here. And I don't know, you know, we'll see what happens with all those guys, but that's really why it's such a critical year and why we should be excited in the first place. It's something different. For a change, we're not coming in and saying, well, you know what you're going to get from this guy and this guy and this guy, and it's the same roster as it's been for the last 5 years. It is certainly not the same roster. And to me, that kind of change can bring everybody together. There's a lot of leaders. Broussard is another addition who, surprisingly, you know, based on everything else that Chuck Fletcher's done in this entire offseason, he was an alternate captain where he was previously too in Arizona. So that's another guy who's part of a leadership group. And I think that now you've really established this locker room for what it is. It's a group of leaders at this point. It's a group of guys who are trusted as veterans who know how to prepare for a game. And I think you're trying to change the whole way that this operation works. And you've done that now, but now it's time to see if it equates to the ice. And Travis Sanheim said it when we had his media availability on Monday following his new contract. Chuck Fletcher did his job this offseason. Now it's on the players to do theirs.
Kevin, a lot of us, to be honest, are in pretty much football mode right now. You know, we're so absorbed with the Eagles season and the football and the college football coming around the bend that, you know, I think a lot of people might not know what happened to the rest of the conference this offseason. So, yeah, the Flyers got better. Yeah, the Flyers look better. Yeah, the expectation that you said is playoff for the Flyers. But what about their competition in the Eastern Conference?
Usually with this, and when I get asked about this or when I think about this, I tend to stick to strictly their division first and foremost, because that's really where you're going to need to see how they stand up with everybody else and how they compare to the competition. You have to start to wonder which teams are going to go the opposite direction and have been so good for so long. At some point in time, Pittsburgh's shelf life is going to run out. They're still kind of dealing with the question marks in goal with Tristan Jarry. Now they have to see, as Crosby ages, as Malkin ages, how much more life do they have left in that core before it eventually fizzles out and they're kind of back to where they were before, maybe, Pittsburgh BC before Crosby, if you will. Washington, same thing. Now, Washington brings back Alex Ovechkin this year on a 5-year contract. And look, there's no reason to believe that he's not going to be the same goal scorer he's been for his entire career to this point. He is absolutely going for the scoring record. I think he needs to average something like 33 goals a year in the final 5 years to break Gretzky's record. I think that's possible. I mean, why wouldn't it be? How often has he scored below 33 goals in his career in a single season as long as he's been healthy? So as long as all that works out, he'll probably do it. But what about the team around him? They've got young goaltenders. They're going to have to, at some point in time, you're going to start to see things change with them too, because if the cap doesn't move, guys are going to go where they can get some money too. So at some point in time, you got to figure out what their situation is and if they're going to continue. And whenever it does happen, I don't know if it's going to be next year. It could be 2 years down the road, 3 years down the road. We just kind of have to see how quickly that takes effect. In terms of some of the other teams, though, New Jersey made a lot of improvements. I don't think it's anything substantial that's going to get them any closer to being a or it gets them close to being a playoff team. I don't think it's going to put them in the playoffs just yet. I think they're not a playoff team at the moment, but we'll see what happens. Carolina probably, is going to have to deal with the loss of Dougie Hamilton, so that's certainly significant on their part, and I wonder if they'll be a little bit worse off for that in the beginning, just because I don't know if they fully addressed it completely. I think that they have maybe a little bit more of a hole there than they used to, and you kind of bounce around. Columbus is not going to be very good. We've already talked about that before, and things like that. So we know that there's a lot of teams. There's room for the Flyers to fit into this picture. The Islanders and the Rangers are really the two teams I think that are the X factors, because the Rangers continue to get better. They've drafted well. They've got a lot of young players. They've got a lot of good veterans. And the Islanders maybe didn't make any significant moves this offseason. They didn't do anything that necessarily is a splash, but they're going to get Anders Lee back, and that's a big enough addition for them. So I think that they've certainly got talent as well, and the Flyers are going to have to find a way to compete. So I think that in just looking at that competition alone, they're somewhere in the range of being that number 3 team probably to the 5th team, which would put them in the playoff conversation. I think that's where you can start with it, and anything they do higher than that, I mean, sure, there's a path where this team might come out and click right away and do a lot of great things, and maybe they become a team that contends for the division, but I think they're somewhere in the middle of that, and that certainly should get you into the playoffs. And then you look at the rest of the conference too. The fact that, it's going to be harder. It's not the same thing as last year now because of the fact that they played the same 7 teams over and over and over again. And that was the way you kind of judged their competition. Now you're going to get games against teams like Arizona that have kind of sold off a lot of their pieces and opened up cap space. You're going to play a new team in Seattle that doesn't necessarily have the flashiest roster on paper, even after signing a couple of free agents. They didn't do a whole lot in the expansion draft that says, look at this team and it looks like a playoff team, and teams like Buffalo and Columbus, like I said, that have taken probably a step back. You're going to have teams that you should go out and beat, and you're going to have teams that are tough competition. I'm thinking the 2 teams in Florida, both Florida and Tampa Bay, they're both formidable opponents still. And you can certainly look, Boston's probably lost a couple of pieces, but at the same time, it's Boston, and Boston seems to always have success, especially against the Flyers. So those are the teams that I think you're going to look at that you constantly go back to and see on a regular enough basis that you go, that's the real measuring stick when you play against them and see how this team stacks up. But there'll be some time for that. I think they play Boston in the early going, but I don't think they play the Florida teams for a little while. So you get some time before you get to kind of get into that rhythm. And it's also a condensed schedule, which could, certainly have some effect on this team. We saw what it did last year, but maybe these new players change things around. Maybe there's a different mood. Maybe winning helps and keeps you wanting to come to the rink every day and try to win another hockey game.
All right, Kevin, before I let you go, I saved the most subjective and salacious question for the end of our conversation. So I said over the weekend in the locker room with Billy Schwein that I think that of the 4 Philly sports team, the only team that I think can win a championship anytime soon is the Flyers. Because as far as I'm concerned, the Eagles are in a rebuilding year. They're in transition. The Phillies are a dumpster fire right now, and I'm so aggravated with them. If they stop playing the season, I won't care at this point. And then the Sixers, as long as they have Ben Simmons, they're never winning a championship, in my opinion. So, to me, the Flyers are the only team of the 4 teams that can win a championship in the near future. Am I crazy to say that?
That's an interesting one. That's really an interesting one. I don't know if it's crazy to think that the Flyers couldn't try to compete. I mean, it's very obvious that's what they're trying to do right now. I mean, they had every opportunity to try to go into this offseason and sell off a lot of pieces and make it a rebuilding year themselves. They didn't do that. They made really savvy player for player deals. Let's be honest about that. You know, getting Ryan Ellis, which filled your biggest offseason need, in my opinion, for 2 players, one of which is comparable in terms of what he is to the team, a right-handed defenseman who you wanted to play top minutes. All right, you got the developed player for the one that is still a project, kind of, I guess is how you would put it. And Nolan Patrick probably just didn't have a place here anymore, just given everything that was going on. I mean, it was kind of time to move on in that case. So you made that trade and got a big, an acquisition that you absolutely needed. The Jake Voracek for Cam Atkinson trade, that's a very savvy move also, because it doesn't really overly affect anything for you. You still had it. That's still a top 6 forward coming back to you for another top 6 forward. And you did it while freeing up some cap space in the process. You made a deal to get Ristolainen, which, again, we've talked about it enough times where, we'll have to see how that one really plays out. It's kind of, the first round pick was a high price to pay for it. You've seen some of these other contracts and deals that have been made that kind of rival this one. And, so I think that that's a quality move. The goaltending is the key. I don't think it really matters what they did. I mean, they could have signed Sean Couturier for the next 12 years at this point, and it won't matter if they don't have goaltending. So Carter Hart's the big key. Martin Jones is kind of the follow-up to that. And then how the defense performs will be the next thing. But you've overhauled that defensive core. You've made a few really savvy decisions at forward in terms of the way that you acquired Atkinson, the signings of Brassard, even a signing like Thompson. I know people are going to look at Nate Thompson and go, they don't really want to see him on the ice that much. I understand that. He's a 4th-line center. And if anybody steps up in the right way as a young player, you might not see as much of Nate Thompson down the road. I think you're going to see him there at the start of the year, and you're asking for somebody, whether it's Morgan Frost, whether it's Tanner Lazinski, whether it's one of those guys, to step up. And let's be real. Chuck Fletcher said when it came to the Brassard signing, they want bodies for this season. It's a condensed schedule, and they feel like they're going to need multiple guys. So don't be surprised if you see all of those names I just mentioned and a few more on top of it and get to something like 27, 28 players used this season, because that's what it's going to take. You need to be able to adjust accordingly and still be able to win games. I think that this team has improved, and I think the first step is you got to make the playoffs. If you make the playoffs, really anything can happen. We've seen teams... I just talked about the Islanders pretty extensively, about one of the teams that kind of sizes you up in terms of this division. And, 2 years ago when they made the playoffs, they were a 7 seed, and they ended up being the team that challenged Tampa Bay, and they can't quite get past Tampa Bay just yet, but they're close. But they made it the first time around as a 7 seed, and they were the 4th seed out of the Metro or out of the East Division this past year, I should say. So seeding does not matter in the playoffs. It really just matters if you come in with the right attitude and you make the playoffs. You're in the dance, and at that point, anything's possible. So if they can just get into the dance first and foremost, then I think that anything is possible with this. And certainly if they can put together a group. Brassard said something really interesting in his availability today, because he said when he was a member of the Islanders 2 years ago and they play the Flyers in that playoff series, whenever they did not have Matt Niskanen, there was a difference. And he mentioned a game that Niskanen didn't play. Niskanen missed that game. And how the whole dynamic changed for them. So it kind of explains, like, that's an opponent telling you they weren't the same team without that guy. So now you've tried to fill that void. You filled a bunch of voids in different places, and now you've got, I think, what might be a better mix, as Chuck Fletcher has said multiple times. I think you've got a better mix, and maybe that gets you into the playoffs and gets you rolling into the playoffs so you can have some success there. But, certainly I think it's on their radar to be potentially a championship team in the next decade. I think that's what the goal is. I mean, I know it's a little bit of a long time window to sit there and say that could be when the next championship is, but I don't want to jump and say they're going to win a cup next year. I don't think anybody's jumping to that just yet, but I think that in due time, if they can keep putting it together the way that they started this offseason, they can be a successful team and maybe reach that finish line.
Look, Kevin's long explanation was that I'm not crazy. That's what Kevin's explanation was.
That's what I gave you.
Listen, when the Flyers win a cup, before anybody else win the championship in the next few years, just know you heard it here first, okay? Kevin at Kevin_Durso on Twitter. Our Flyers insider over at 97.3ESP.com. And of course, covers all the NHL as well. Follow him at Kevin_Durso on Twitter. Kevin, I appreciate you jumping on tonight and at least bringing some positivity to the Philadelphia sports world for a day.
Absolutely. Anytime, Josh.
Josh Hennig here on Game Night on 97.3 ESPN FM. Of course, we will get to your thoughts and comments before we wrap up the show here on 97.3 ESPN FM. The 97.3 ESPN mobile app, it's free thanks to First Bank of Seattle City. And we are live on YouTube and Twitter where you can join the conversation. Just follow at 97.3 ESPN.
The hunt for October continues this weekend on ESPN Radio.
Bounces off the track and hits the top of the wall. Judge into second. Aaron Judge delivers.
Aaron Judge and the New York Yankees continue their 9-game road trip when they head to Oakland to face Matt Olson and the A's. The Yankees and A's. Coverage begins Saturday at 3:30 Eastern and Sunday at 6 Eastern.
Listen to Major League Baseball on 97.3 ESPN.
New Jersey car owners, stop what you're doing and come see AJ, the trade-in man, at Matt Blatt Nissan.
Oh, yeah, it's on at Matt Blatt Nissan.
Cancel that service appointment. Let your tires go bald. Don't put another penny in that old car. The value of your current vehicle has skyrocketed, so cash in your vehicle now. Used car values are at an all-time high. Your car may be worth more than you think. New 2021 Nissan Frontier 4x4 truck. 0 due at signing. Lease $349 per month. Stuck in a loan or lease? We can get you released. We'll buy your car for cash, even if you don't buy a car from us. Worried about your credit? Don't sweat it. Get $3,000 back on every 2021 Nissan Murano and pay 0 interest for 60 months in Egg Harbor Township, next to Home Depot, or online at mattblattnissan.com. Negative equity will be refinanced as a new vehicle. Great qualifications exist. Not all will qualify. 0% APR based on 1667 per thousand borrowed. Offers can't be combined. 36-month, 10,000 miles per year lease. Call 877-289-6670 or go to mattblattnissan.com for complete details. Offer ends 9/6/21. It's on at Matt Blatt Nissan on the Black Horse Pike, Egg Harbor Township.
Gonna miss you around here, Iris.
Olivia's best optometry technician is going back to school.
Did we get
Now, more Game Night with Josh Hennig on 97.3 ESPN and the free mobile app.
Josh Hennig live here in the Matt Black Kia Studios here on 97.3 ESPN FM, the 97.3 ESPN mobile app. We are live as always on YouTube and Twitter at 973 ESPN. Yes, Matt Black Kia, that we get you approved today. That's Matt Black Kia on the Black Horse Pike in Egg Harbor Township. Visit them online at mattblackkia.com. Right now over at 97.3 ESPN.com, Mike Gill has his 6 options for the Phillies to replace Rhys Hoskins. For those who didn't hear, Rhys Hoskins is done for the year. He was not just placed on the injured list today to make room for, and part of a flurry of moves, they made room for Zach Eflin and Alvarado on the roster, but he also told the reporters today that he will be having surgery on his lower abdomen to repair, and he is done for the year. Now, the expectation is he will be back all good to go for spring training, but at least for 2021, he is completely done. The team's RBI leader with 71 RBIs this year is done, and we're not even in September. Third time in 5 years, Rhys Hoskins has at least 27 home runs in a season. So a huge loss to a team that in the games without him, he missed from August 5th to August 22nd. During that time frame, the Phillies only scored about 2.8 runs per game. So not a good situation. And check out some of the options for the Phillies moving forward. Head over to 973ESPN.com or the 973 ESPN mobile app. Mike Gill gave you the options there. And I got to say, the 6 option, which was an idea of our 973 Phillies insider Frank Close, I have to say the 6 option might be the best option. And the second best option is the 4th option. You want to know what I'm talking about? Just go to 973ESPN.com and 973 ESPN mobile app. I think that the 4th and 6th options are the 2 best options at this point, but that's just my opinion. Before we get out of here, I do want to also hit on, we did touch on the Eagles a little bit earlier. You know, one of the things to keep in mind, I want to remind everybody about, so the Eagles just, they gave Kerryon Johnson an injury settlement. So he can now sign with another team when he's healthy. So he won't be taking up a spot on their IR. But with that in mind, I want to remind everybody about the schedule for what's going on. So the Eagles preseason game is tomorrow. This is the new schedule the NFL has. It's only 3 preseason games. You hear all the action right here on 97.3 ESPN. Probably the final 10 roster spots will in part be decided tomorrow night. Coverage begins at 6:30 here on your home for Eagles football in South Jersey, 97.3 ESPN. But on Tuesday the 31st at 4 p.m., the rosters have to be set at 53 for the first time. It won't be the final roster, but it'll be the first time the Eagles have to cut down and get down to 53. So you have a very short window from preseason game to limiting the roster. Then you have this huge amount of time from the 31st to the first week of the season. Think about that. You are going to go from the 31st for an entire week through Labor Day weekend. No preseason games, no other major deadlines for the NFL. And then the first week of the NFL comes right to Labor Day. So it's something to keep in mind, the timing of all this. Between Friday night and Tuesday at 4 p.m. Eastern Time is going to be a very interesting period to keep an eye on the Eagles. What the Eagles do, keep it tuned right here at 97.3 ESPN.
Sunday on Compass Media Network's coverage of the NFL, the regular season is in sight as the Dallas Cowboys and Jacksonville Jaguars conclude the preseason from Dallas, Texas. Hi, this is Kevin Figures. Join Kevin Ray, Danny White, and myself for all the action as Mike McCarthy and the Cowboys look to end the preseason with a victory against Urban Meyer and the Jaguars. It's the Cowboys and the Jaguars. If it's the NFL, it's right here.
Coverage begins at 12:30 on 97.3 ESPN.